Welcome, welcome everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to learn a word that is very unique to chemistry. A mole, lucky for you, doesn't just have one definition, it actually has three definitions. In chemistry, a mole can be equivalent to a mass. A mole can equal a volume, and a mole can equal a quantity. Today we're going to focus specifically on the definition of a mole that's equivalent to a mass. You should also know, and it seems weird, that the abbreviation for a mole just happens to be MOL. I guess all the other abbreviations were used. So it's pretty much the word mole, except the E is missing. Now, when we talk about a mole equaling a mass, the question that you have to ask yourself is, what is the mass and how do I know the mass? Because it really changes depending on the substance that we're looking at. When I look at the first question, which asks for the mass of 1 mole of carbon, 1 mole of carbon is actually equivalent to 12.01 grams. But if I now change the substance that I'm looking at, 1 mole can also equal 1 mole of water, can also equal 17.99 grams. But if I ask for 1 mole of hydrogen gas, 1 mole of hydrogen gas doesn't equal the other two. It equals 2.00 grams. So to know the definition of a mole as a mass, you should know that it's really dependent on the formula given and the substance that we're looking at. That's why 1 mole of carbon can equal 12.01 grams, but 1 mole of hydrogen gas is equal to 2.00 grams. So in essence, 1 mole is really equal to the gram formula mass or sometimes we call it the gram molecular mass. Since this is a mass, you should know that the units are very specific. Our unit is going to be grams. And we can just write the word gram, or we can abbreviate it with a lowercase g. Now, to make things even more confusing, sometimes the definition of 1 mole as a mass is known as molar mass. And molar mass is essentially just what we've been doing in the last couple of days. It is the total amount of all the elements together. So if the question reads, what is the molar mass of methane? All we're doing is exactly what we've done before. First, we need to know the formula of methane. Methane happens to be CH4. Then I write down what I have and how many. So I have 1 carbon, and I'm going to multiply by the mass given on the periodic table to 2 decimal places. I know that I have hydrogen, and there are 4 of them, and when I double check its mass, it happens to be 1 gram. I multiply across, and then I end up adding, going down. So I end up getting the molar mass of methane to be 16.01. But here's the difference. When we start to use molar mass, the units are now going to change. Because by definition, molar mass is the mass of 1 mole in grams. So the units, when they specifically ask for molar mass, is going to be grams over mole. And you can abbreviate it lowercase g over MOL. So in order to get the right answer for this question, it's not just 16.01, it's 16.01 grams per mole. And that's really telling us that 1 mole of methane is equivalent to 16.01 grams. Now, some other types of questions that you're going to encounter when we talk about the mole being a mass is really how to convert either moles to mass or mass to moles. And I'm going to show you 2 different methods that you can utilize. One that's kind of older and one that you tend to use in math. And you're allowed to use either one, whichever one is comfortable for you. So the first method that we're going to utilize is dimension analysis. You learned this way back in topic 0. The question reads, how many grams are there in 6.98 moles of H2O? So the first step that we have to take care of, because we're changing moles to mass, is really calculating the molar mass. I need to know the molar mass of H2O. That's what's given to me. So I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to write down what I have, how many I have, and then I'm going to find the mass on the periodic table. Whoops, I have 2 hydrogens. And I'm going to put it in the units of grams. So this becomes 2 grams for hydrogen. I also have oxygen. I have 1 oxygen, and its mass on the periodic table taken to 2 decimal places is 15.99 grams. And when I sum them together, I get a molar mass of 17.99 grams per mole, because it's molar mass. Now, step 2 is really to set up the dimensional analysis T. And I'm just going to shorthand. And if you remember, it's the little T shape. So I'm going to draw the little T shape. I'm going to take what's given from the problem, which happens to be 6.98 moles. And I'm going to put that right here on the left side of the T. On the other side, I now am going to put in the molar mass. But I'm going to put the molar mass in a way in which the moles can cancel themselves out, or the units of moles can cancel themselves out. So I'm going to write down 1 mole is equivalent to 17.99 grams. By putting it in the T this way, I'm allowed to cancel out moles because one is at the top and the other one's at the bottom. When I plug everything into the calculator, I end up getting an answer of 125.572. Now the units would be grams because that's the only unit that I'm left with, but you also have to consider sig figs. This problem is given a number that is in 3 sig figs. So your answer must also be in 3 sig figs. So I start counting from the left, 1, 2, 3, and the next number is my helper number. That number is large, so my answer to the question of how many grams are in 6.98 moles of water ends up being 126, and I'm going to write down the units of grams. That's equivalent to 6.98 moles. So I just converted my moles into a mass. Now the second method that we're going to use is just proportions. And you've been setting up proportions in math for a long time. So some of you might find it easier. It does not matter which one that you like. All right? Choose one that you find the easiest for you. Step 1 is still going to be the same. Step 1 is still going to be to calculate molar mass. And since we have the actual same substance from before, the molar mass is the same from the problem in the last slide, which happens to be 17.99 grams per mole. And then step 2 for this method is really to set up a proportion. All right? When we set up a proportion, we think about what we have. So in this case, we're going to have 17.99 grams is equivalent to 1 mole. But my problem, I'm given 0.93 grams, and I don't know how many moles that happens to be. Now, when we do proportion, we have to cross multiply. So we end up getting 17.99x is equivalent to 0.93. We divide both sides by 17.99. And your answer ends up being, once you plug it into the calculator, 0.051695 and a whole bunch of other numbers. Now, I still have to consider sig figs. In my problem, I'm given 2 sig figs, so my answer must also be in 2 sig figs. So I'm going to calculate sig figs, or I'm going to get my answer sig figs. This first 2 zeros don't count. This one and this one does. The 6 ends up being my helper number. So my answer ends up being 0.052. And the unit, you have to be careful, the unit what x should have been happens to be a mole. So to answer my question, 0.093 grams of water is equivalent to 0.052 moles. All right, you're going to try some on your own. I'll see you in the next lesson.